Hello, everybody. We have about 70 to 80 people online today, and I want to thank you all for joining. It's a global audience, and again, thank you for getting up early in the morning or ending your day with the webinar. Today is a very good webinar in the series program, and again, all these are put up as audio casts with the content, so if you go into the website, you can get all the past ones. Today is going to be about DSpace, and we have the executive director for business development, Michelle Timpson for DSpace, and we have the director for the all things technical, Brad McClain here. We're going to get in, do some demos, be available to answer questions on DSpace. And following their presentation, which will be about 30 minutes or so, we will go into some reference architectures that the Sun Education Solutions architect, Keith Rajecki, has been working on. So with that, let me just get into a brief introduction for those of you who are new. We've done several of these series, and again, they are posted. We're very heavily focused on reference architectures. What's been happening is we've done reference architectures along the, small ingest to large ingest, small, medium, large side of things with the equipment for years it's done. Now a lot of people are coming to us asking about cloud computing services. So we just generate a lot of content at Open Repository 09 that Keith, I, and one of our other architects, Ray Clark, developed. So that's available to you. We are doing one-on-one calls, architectural calls using that same content either on specifically cloud or on reference architectures or talking about open storage and tiered architectures around DSpace, Fedora, and ePrint. So we do that all the time. Email me. We do have an alias. Just send me on the slide, there's my email, pretty self-explanatory, and we do set these up. I also have a blog that I use, very 1990s, early 2000s. I use it as my archive, but it's good for people to go and see past emails that we've been putting out related to the webinar series or the Sun Preservation Archive Special Interest Group. That has about 650 members to it, people involved in repositories, data curation, cloud computing, and preservation. And we'll be having our next meeting in Malta. It looks like we'll have about 130 people there, very much focused on, again, the topics on the slide. So if you want some in-depth one-on-one time with experts in the field and Sun technologists, that is a very good forum. So it's still open. You missed the early bird special, but I think the fee is $200, and the hotel's fairly inexpensive. The agenda for that, if you are interested and you're just getting into archiving, preservation, repositories, managing big data sets or national heritage materials, highly recommend it. There's no other conference that puts the technology side of things together with the community side of things and the area around preservation and architecture around preservation. So if you're just starting to get into this, it is definitely worth the money. We'll be doing a half-day deep dive on technologies around archiving. That's an optional session. 2 very full days of presentations and receptions, so there's a lot of one-on-one contact. And then the last day we have Dave Rosenthal talking for about 45 minutes on very interesting topics for this community especially, and then also some deep dives, for instance, on Ex Libris Rosetta, OIS architecture. So any questions, just send them to me. Now, if you want to be on the alias, just send me the email too. So with that, I welcome everybody, and let's get into the presentation. I'll be around for the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Art. Welcome everybody to the DSpace open source software platform overview. Thank you all for attending today. My name is Michelle Kimpton, and I am the Executive Director for the DSpace Foundation. Also with me today is Brad McLean, and he is the Technical Director for the DSpace Foundation, and we will be giving the majority of the presentation today. Okay, I'm trying to get to my next slide.
Michelle, you can just click on the slide and then advance it with your arrow if you're having problems.
Yeah, it's not showing. Can someone advance it for me? Oh, there we go. Sorry about this. Karine, can you advance it? Great. Yep. Okay. Sorry about that. So what is DSpace? I'm sure many of you are familiar, but just in case, DSpace is an open source software application that is freely available to anyone or any organization to use to provide permanent access and be able to manage your digital content and research output. It is available under the BSD license. This means, which is an open source license, this means that anybody can not only use it, but also customize it, modify it, contribute code for it, and even build it into their commercial applications. Next. So why would you be interested in creating a digital repository? Some of the main reasons that people look to build repositories is that they want to provide broad access to their content that is created within their organization. So sometimes people get confused because DSpace is an open source application as well as a community of users and developers. It is not a central repository where people input and deposit their collections. Each organization runs their own DSpace instance, which is enabling others to access their research output or their publications from that organization. One of the other great things about repositories is that it not only provides you with a way to manage this content, but also has preservation tools and persistent identifiers that allow you to manage this content over time and make it durable. And it's a great tool for organizations that have the role of stewardship. So they want to provide permanent access to these materials after the faculty is gone or the students are gone, and many times libraries within universities are providing the stewardship role, particularly for at-risk digital content, and DSpace enables you to do that quite easily. Next. So something that's been happening in academia of recent, which I just thought I'd point out, which is why there has been a rise in the growth of digital repositories are open access mandates. And so this is a chart that was put together by Alma Swan, who is an open access advocate in the community. And there are now more and more universities and departments that are requiring their faculty and their students to make their research output openly available. MIT just launched a university-wide mandate, which they also gave to publishers saying, hey, our faculty, when they publish an article, we're going to make that available in our institutional repository. And yes, you can publish it, but that content is also going to be available for free in our repository. Next. A little bit about the history of the DSpace platform. It was developed in collaboration between MIT and HP. MIT in roughly the year 2000 joined together with HP because they had a need to start preserving, and they wanted to provide access to a lot of the digital materials that were being generated from the MIT community, and they didn't have a software or a system to do that. So they joined forces in creating the software, and they released it. They made the first initial release open source in 2002, and they really spent a lot of effort over the next several years developing a community of users and contributors around this software because they felt that they wanted the software to be dynamic, they wanted it to evolve because archiving digital content was going to need to evolve, and they wanted to be able to enable a broad community to participate and add to this process. That was some of the motivations for making it open source. So today, the DSpace community has over 600 users. So there's over 600 installations of DSpace worldwide. And in the last year, we've had 200 new organizations come bring a DSpace application up and live on the Internet. Next. And that community is geographically dispersed. There's still a large percentage of users, of course, in the U.S., but we have a fairly high presence in the UK, in Japan, in Canada, and in many developing countries, such as in Africa and in India, where people have research output, and DSpace is an easy way to enable them to expose that output. Next. So something that I think is worth mentioning about the development process is what is unique with open source versus a vendor-based solution is that the roadmap for the software, the release schedules, what features and functionality get built into the software is really controlled and managed by the community at large with the help of the foundation to provide some guidance, and that's really a lot of what Brad does, our technical director. But the actual writing of the code comes from hundreds of contributors working in different universities and organizations around the world, and that process is managed by basically 14 active, what we call committers, but they're really lead developers in the community. And they also come from universities and organizations that are using DSpace. And so this group gets together on a regular basis and looks at what features and functionality and what bugs need to be fixed in the software, and they put out a release schedule that is in tune with what the needs of the community is. So the development process is not dictated by one company or one corporation or a few individuals. It is really a community process, and that makes the software much more robust and feature-rich and broad because you have contributions that are from all over. Next. Okay, some of the key features of DSpace, and this is the broad features, so I'll get into more specifics. Obviously, it's open source. We have the largest community of users and developers worldwide out of any of the open source platforms, or really any of the commercial platforms. So some other technologies you might look at when you're looking at repositories would be ePrints or Fedora. Microsoft just launched Zentity, which is an open source repository platform. Bpress is a commercially available platform, and out of all of those, I mean, they all have, great features and functionality for different types of use cases. But in terms of the community, DSpace has the largest community, and this has really been a big advantage when you become part of the DSpace community because there are always others that have your same use case in your region that you can work with. Another key factor is DSpace works out of the box. So very low upfront investment to get started, and you don't need programmers on hand or large infrastructure to get the system installed and working. It has a built-in web application. It has a built-in user administration interface. It has a built-in workflow. So it works straight away without a lot of customization. And the product was really designed with libraries in mind. So it's been very successful in university libraries because of the workflow, the administrative interface, and the metadata schemas it supports. It works with a variety of media types, and I'll go through those briefly, but really anything from video to audio to text to Word documents, PDFs, you can ingest and manage in the system. And due to the contributions from our global community, it's available in over 20 languages. So there's translation packs that are available with DSpace to convert it to a number of languages so you can localize it. So The biggest use of DSpace is really for managing your research output, whether it's publications or theses or dissertations that are coming from your faculty and students. And so one of the largest initial users is MIT. So I'm not going to go to the internet, but these are all links you can look at later if you download the presentation. So dspace.mit.edu would be a very typical DSpace instance and use case. But it is not, even though that's the largest use case, it's not limited to just managing research output. Swinburne, which is an organization in Australia, has an image bank, and so it's really an image library that they use DSpace for. It has a very different look and feel than, say, the MIT DSpace instance. The Afghanistan Digital Library hosts all the manuscripts which have been digitized from Afghanistan. This is a project done by NYU. And so you can go on that site and you can flip through the original manuscripts online that were out of the Afghanistan archive. Smithsonian Institution is a museum, obviously, that uses DSpace. Woods Hole is a research center, and the Carlos Jobim Music Archive is a composer who has all of his music and scores and audio and even video as part of his personal DSpace archive. So several different examples, but really a variety of use cases and media that people host DSpace with. Next. So this is just an example of different types of content that a variety of organizations use to host DSpace. Next. So this is a visual representation of DSpace, and on the front end you have submitters. These could be faculty, or these could be folks within a research organization or a library that are managing putting content into DSpace. That content could be individual files, and then they would put metadata describing that content. There would also be administrative metadata that would automatically be tagged to the content, and those files and that metadata would make up an item. Those items would then be assigned to a collection. So a collection is a group of related items, and then those collections would make up communities, and communities could be departments or colleges or research centers within an organization. So that is the informational model. You've got files, which are part of items, items which are part of collections, and collections that are part of communities. On the front end, you have the end user, which through a web application could then retrieve those individual items and files associated. They retrieve it through browse and search index that's built into the application. And on the back end, you can push those items into an asset store or file system, which you will have a number of tools that will help you preserve those items and migrate those items over time. Next. So again, the information model is really divided into these areas. There's communities, which can be departments or colleges within an organization. It could really be, these can be anything, but this is the most common way that people have used it. There's collections, which are typically subject areas or topical areas for a given community. There's the items, which is the logical content object. The item is then given a persistent identifier. And I'll talk a little bit about this moving forward. And then the files themselves are called the bit streams, and these files are made up of bits, and it's the bits that are managed in the asset store and have checksums applied to them so that you can do bit integrity checking and also receive other preservation treatment over time. Next. So this is, again, the informational model, but in a visual form, again, the bit streams, which roll actually into bundles, which can be a number of files and associated records make up a bundle, roll into an item, a collection, and a community. Next. So just to give you a flavor, this is what's called an item page in DSpace. So you have a number of files you can see at the bottom here that are associated with an item. The item is the record for what the content is in this given item. So you have the metadata, which gives you the abstract, the rights associated with the item, the files associated with this given item, and then you see the URI, and this is the persistent identifier. So for each organization, they have the option to register with CRN to get a handle. That handle will give it a unique ID to them, and then it will also assign a unique persistent identifier to the actual item, so that if the item is moved to a different server or what have you, that URI will persist. So if it's linked to in other parts of the internet, people can always find it. Next. Okay, so in terms of the overview of the features, I'm splitting it up in three areas: the collection management, the discovery, and the preservation. So in the collection management, one of some of the areas that make DSpace unique is really some of the feature-rich functionality that you see as an administrator of the system. So without any programming skills, you can log in to the web-based interface, and from there you can set up communities and collections. You can set up groups, which are groups of people that have been authenticated in the system. Those groups can be assigned privileges, and each collection and or community can have authorization privileges associated with it, which will help, and you can put different workflows in place for each of those collections in terms of when an item is ingested, then what is the workflow process that item must go through in order to get approved to be put into a given collection. And so you can set up groups of individuals to review those items at different stages of the process. The standard metadata is a Dublin Core metadata schema, although there are tools that will allow you to ingest and display mods as well, and you can customize the metadata schema in Dublin Core so you can add fields if needed. The workflow process itself, the submission workflow, as well as the administrative workflow is customizable in terms of what rights you want to assign, how you want to authorize in the actual steps. The DSpace itself comes with an authentication system, but it also supports LDAP and Shibboleth as authentication protocols. And for any items that an author puts into the system, they can assign a Creative Commons license to that work if they want to share it or hold all the copyright or attribution. You can also batch import and export files and items in and out of DSpace. And there is a statistics package, a basic one that it comes with, but there are several other packages available as add-ons. And in the next release, 1.6, will have more options than they have today for statistics. Next. Discovery. Within the application, there is an index engine, which is Lucene. The index engine basically creates fully text searchable, has a fully text searchable search engine, so it not only indexes the metadata, but it also indexes any text. So you can do a full text search on text items. The system is also OAI PMH compliant, which allows metadata to be harvested by other systems for display in a variety of portals and things that try to pull out various research content. Anything that's publicly available, so the URI can be exposed to a user coming into the web application, that content is indexed by Google and Google Scholar. Google Scholar actually has a list of DSpace sites, and they will index those sites on a regular basis to expose the research output as long as it's public. You can customize the DSpace user interface in DSpace 1.5. We have a new UI, which is called Mannequin. It was developed by Texas A&M, and you can basically completely change the look and feel, the way items are displayed, the whole setup of the page by using the Mannequin interface, which was not possible in versions prior to 1.5. And as I mentioned, the handle system is embedded within DSpace if you choose to use it, which would assign a persistent identifier, which in terms of preservation strategy and access is a nice thing to have. Next. Preservation. So some of the key features of preservation is that when you upload a file, there's a checksum run, which means it looks at, does a test and assigns a number to that file, and then you can run checksums periodically to make sure the file hasn't changed, that there's bit integrity and no bit rot has happened, and that's built into the system. There is a file format registry, which when someone uploads a file, it then validates that that file is actually what the user said it was, and then an institution can determine support policies around different file types. So if somebody uploads, for example, a WAV file and your institution doesn't want to deal with WAV files, it can say to the user, hey, this WAV file is not supported, sorry, and then they would have to go convert it to a format that is supported. You can set up a separate asset store behind your DSpace instance. So in other words, instead of just having a copy of your items on your local file server, you can push it to a third-party asset store. Maybe that's another server in your data center. Maybe it's the SRB storage broker system or Amazon S3, for example. And there is there's an audit trail for all the actions that take place in the system. So if somebody edits the metadata associated with an item or removes an item, you can print out an audit trail of any action for any given user or any given item. Okay, so the question is, will this work? So I'm going to try and do a demo, but I had problems before, so we're going to see if this works. Okay. Do you see that? The DSpace Mannequin repository?
We're good with that.
We're good? Okay. Okay, so this is an example of a DSpace repository. It's actually a test repository, and I've logged on. I'm an administrator to DSpace. So I'm just going to show you quickly. You can see on the right side of my screen there are a number of administrative things I can set up. I can edit the metadata. I can change my format registry to put in different policies for different types of files. I can change authorizations for collections, saying it's read-only, it's write-only, it's write-and-edit, and I can assign groups to those collections with certain authorization privileges. But for today, since we've got not very much time, I am just going to submit something. So I go to submissions, I log in, I start a new submission, and I select the collection. So I'll do the DSpace Foundation presentations. And this is what the item submission looks like for, an authenticated user that can upload content into a collection. So you've given them the rights to upload content to a given collection. This can be edited. The item submission process is now editable in version 1.6, 1.5, so you can change these steps around. So this is what the default screen looks like. It's going to ask you for an author, and you can choose to fill these out or not, because it will still accept the submission otherwise, unless you dictate certain fields are required when you set it up in the administration. You can get a feel of what's available, and here's where I'm selecting the type of item. language, okay, and I'm going to not spend a lot of time filling these out, but you can get a feel of the descriptive metadata that's available. Okay, and then I'm ready to upload my file. And it allows me to upload multiple files because, as you remember, I have multiple files associated with a given item. So this is really the item page, which is describing I'm doing this presentation. So I've uploaded a PowerPoint. You can see that this is a supported format, at least in this particular system. It gives me a checksum, which then I can continue to check over time to make sure that my file has not changed. And then I can, at this point, upload another file. Let's say I wanted a PDF version of the same presentation. Or I can move on. This allows me to review what I've submitted. Obviously, I didn't fill out a lot of these fields, but then I could correct them. And then this is the standard license, which is what this is saying, and this can be modified by your organization. It's saying that I am submitting this work, and I am the legal author and have all rights to this work. So it's basically saying that I am the owner, and by submitting it, I'm granting you access to it as well. Okay, so that is that, and then if I go back to the communities page where I have the DSpace Foundation collection, there you can see my recent submission right here, which is called Presentation. And if I open that, that gives you the item page for this presentation with the file. And of course, I didn't put a lot of stuff in it, and it finds the handle. And there's not a lot of stuff in it because I didn't fill out a big metadata record associated with it. So that's just really a very, very quick demonstration. Okay, now I'm going to return to the meeting window. All right, and now I will hand it over to Brad, who is going to do a quick run-through of the application architecture. Kleiner, are you going to change over to Brad, or do I need to do that?
You need to do that.
So tell me again.
Just click on Brad's name and then click on Presenter, and the ball should be handed over to him. I think you have to.
Okay, I'm going to give a very rapid presentation through a number of slides here that are taken from the DSpace course, which is readily available from www.dspace.org, and will take you into much more depth than I'm going to today. DSpace is a Java application. It's organized into a sort of standard three-tier architecture with a series of applications on the top, a business logic layer, and a storage layer underneath. The storage layer splits into two pieces. The physical storage of the actual content, the items that are deposited, those go into a bitstream storage manager, which can either sit on top of a standard file system or can go to an SRD resource broker, and in the future will go to other plugins. The rest of the data, so the metadata, indexing, information about the people and policies are all stored in a relational database. In the business logic layer, we have things that control all of the workflow and authorization pieces. You were just seeing Michelle demonstrate. Also pieces to record history, the handle system, as well as other administrative pieces, including statistics. Out at the application layer, the two bases that most people see are the web user interfaces. We have a traditional one, which is our JSP UI, and then we have the mannequin or XML UI. These are options. You may use either of them, and they create the front door to the DSpace system. Then there are additional applications that can be run generally as batch jobs in the background. Those include our statistics tools and importers and exporters for the data, as well as media filters. So when you look at a DSpace server, you have our user interface code, which runs on top of a web application server, Tomcat as an example, which then makes connections to the disk and file store for the asset store and to the database. All of those can be running together on a single server, or they can be split apart into dedicated servers for each function, depending upon what's most comfortable for your institution. When we look into the structure of DSpace, working with DSpace, there's a source directory, which, as you can see, is where source code resides. There's an install directory, and this is where you generally make edits to your local configuration and do any back-end operations. And then finally, there's the web deployment directory, which goes wherever your particular web application container is. So in the case of Tomcat, it would be under the Tomcat Web Apps DSpace. I'm going to skip over walking you through the details of everything that's in the source directory in the interest of time today, and again refer you back to the website for more in-depth, and similarly with the installed piece. The system records events into log files. Those go into two main locations, one in your installed directory for DSpace events, and the other into your web server, web application server directory for web-related events. It's important, of course, with any system to keep it backed up, and in the case of the DSpace, obviously you would want to back up your asset store and hold on to all of the bit strings of your items. You'll need to back up your database, and then if you've made any modifications or changes to your DSpace, you'll want to keep a backup in your source directory and of the installation directory where you've made your configuration. In terms of operating a DSpace, there are sort of two major groups of people. There's the repository manager, and then there's associated technical staff. In some cases, these are one and the same person or one and the same half person. The repository managers generally manage the repository via the DSpace user interface, and that's what you just saw Michelle doing in part as she was looking through the administrative operations. If you need to do any special configuration or customization, that's generally done out at the back end at the command line using the configuration directory. If you go through other sections of this course online, there are several examples of how to do configuration of features that require special work. So these slides were stolen from Stuart Lewis and Chris Yates. I want to stress again that this is just a taste of a much longer course which has some 20 elements in it that I would encourage you all to take a look at. And with that, I'm going to hand you back to Michelle.
Great. Thanks, Brad. And hopefully it works this time.
There you are. Okay. Yep. You have the ball.
There we go. Okay, and as Brad was talking about, this is a clip from our website. There is a DSpace course. If you go on the dspace.org website and you go under training, under resources, under training, or under getting started, either one, you will find these materials. And so this is put together by the Repository Support Project out of the UK, and there is a module for everything that you want to know about DSpace, and it is quite comprehensive and good, and includes a workbook as well as detailed notes for each section. So So I'm just going to talk briefly, very briefly, because we're running out of time, about the DSpace Foundation and the role within the community. So these are the members of the DSpace Foundation. Myself as the Executive Director, Brad is the Technical Director, and Valerie Hollister, who's our Community Outreach Manager. And then we also have a Webmaster. And the four of us really work together to support the community, drive the roadmap, and promote the use of the DSpace platform, as well as open access to information. These are the key areas that we've worked on over the last year: reaching out to new users, managing the roadmap with the community, improving communication, building partnerships. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but for those of you that are new to DSpace or want to know more about DSpace, I just wanted to let you know about a couple things. We do produce a newsletter every month, which is a great way to find out what's going on in the community, who are the new users to DSpace, and the technical updates to the platform. And you can sign up for that on our website. We also did launch a new website, which is really geared towards frequent users as well as completely new users. So we have an introduction video on there. We have everybody that uses DSpace, the listing of their website and where they are geographically, and as well as all these training materials. I'm just going to touch briefly on the roadmap, since one of the things the Foundation works on. We just released 1.5.2 about a month ago. That has SWORD integrated in it, which is a deposit protocol, which will allow you to deposit things automatically into repositories, say, from our Microsoft Word application. We also have integrated Shibboleth and LDAP authentication. 1.6, which is the next version, is coming out in the fall, and our Stuart Lewis, which is one of our committers, is going to be heading that release, and he just did a big survey with the community to see what are the most important things that they would like in this new release, and these were the three things that were asked for: improved statistics, embargo capability, and batch metadata editing. There are a number of statistics packages that have been developed by the community, but they haven't been rolled up into the default code, and many of them didn't work with the mannequin interface. And so those are things that will be worked on for the next release in fall. And the embargo, I'm just pointing this out because I saw it come up on the chat. Right now, you can make something dark or set authorization or set different access privileges to a given item, but there's no automated way to remove those access privileges. You've got to kind of manually go in and do it. So the embargo capability will have an automated way to set a time that something is restricted or dark, and then made available after that time period. Brad has been leading a team from the community to work on the new DSpace 2.0, which is a completely different architecture, much more flexible and modular, that will follow a completely different informational data model than the one I presented today, which will give much more flexibility in terms of versioning and relationships between files and items than you can do today. We're not going to talk about that today, but it's just to let you know that that's the first set of code is available. It's really for developers at this stage, and we're looking towards releasing something to end users really within the next year or so from now. I'm going to skip over this. If you're getting up and started with DSpace and you need more help and you can't find it on the website or from the community, we do have a number of service providers. You can find these on the website under service providers. They're located all over the world. Many of them are active, very active in the community, and they're an excellent resource to get up and running with DSpace if you need some additional technical help. These are a number of key partnerships. I'm just going to highlight one, which is Fedora Commons. As many of you might have heard, Fedora Commons and DSpace as of July 1st are joining our organizations to form DuraSpace. So the DSpace software platform, as well as the Fedora Commons software platform, as well as a new open technology called DuraCloud and Moldera, will be all supported under the DuraSpace organization, and that will be a joining of both the current nonprofit organizations, DSpace Foundation and Fedora Commons. couple of useful resources for you, particularly if you're getting started. Please go to our website. It is really rich with information. Go to the Getting Started guide on the website. Also, if you want to download DSpace onto your own desktop and try it out like I was doing through the demo, you can download Live CD. That will allow you to submit items in the administrative workflow process, see the workflow, and really get a good feel for how DSpace operates. So it's called Live CD, and there's a link to it on the Getting Started page. We are also in a partnership with a company called Jumpbox that packages up a downloadable image that you can install straight to a Linux server and get up and running in DSpace in a default configuration in a production environment. And that will be available probably in about a week to 2 weeks' time. Once you're, starting to get familiar with DSpace, the mailing list, the general and the technical, particularly the technical, is a great place to ask questions if you get stuck, and you can register for the mailing list via the website. The wiki is, again, rich with a lot of detail. Anybody can post to it their experiences, their tips and tricks, customizations they've done, and so another great resource, and of course, the newsletter. So these are hot links to the useful places to go, and if you get a copy of this presentation, then you can go right there. Okay, so that's all the Foundation's going to talk about. Sorry for taking up so much time, but I will now pass it to Keith, if I can find him. There you go.
Great, thank you very much, Rochelle and Brad. That was excellent in-depth view of DSpace. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about, as Art mentioned, reference architectures and some of the Sun technologies that we positioned to support DSpace implementation. And you'll see on the slide here a representation of a repository architecture supporting client activity through the digital library, the library management system, e-research data sets, e-publishing environment, to provide access via web front end into DSpace digital repository, which connects into a back-end Sun unified storage platform. On the next slide here, this is where we get into, as was mentioned, the long-term preservation archive of digital repositories for the purposes of long-term preservation of the digital assets within an environment. And what we've done here is we've basically incorporated the DSpace repository application within the Infinite Archive system, which takes advantage of the multi-tiered storage architectures of high-speed disk for fast access, SATA disk for low-speed online access, and then our modular tape library system for the nearline access. So the data is still online. Obviously, you can pull tapes out of the modular tape library and store them on a shelf or deep archive. But this provides for the long-term preservation of the repository data. The Sun Storage 7000 Unified Storage Systems provide the open architecture, open data format, as well as open protocols, all based around the Open Solaris appliance platform, leveraging the Zeta file system for hybrid storage pools and taking advantage of the dtrace functionality for analytics and reporting on utilization. So there's a number of important factors for unified storage in that it provides, because of the mix and matching of commodity components, it provides for not just the highest yield per dollar per gigabit, but dollar per IOP, dollar per megabits per second, per IOP per second, a number of different classifications of the effectiveness and cost efficiency of the storage platform. Because of the ability to customize the configuration of a 7000 to use solid state disk, high-speed disk, attach JBOD onto the 7000, you're able to truly build out a scalable storage architecture that leverages the robustness and the check capabilities of DFS into an appliance model. And one of the key components of that, because it's open source and all based on open standards, there's no individual appliance software fees or license fees or fees associated with using any of the different open protocols that are part of the solution set there. As I mentioned, for preservation purposes, the Infinite Archive system, some of the core features of the Infinite Archive is basically the ability to create a policy-driven auto-archive functionality to distributedly locate your data, taking use of the different tiers of the storage architecture to efficiently store your digital objects based on preservation policies or the access requirements for specific objects within your repository. And again, this is a combination of fiber channel data and tape technologies. The advantage of this system as well is it comes shipped ready to run. It's built in the Sun Customer Ready Solution Center. So we've done all of the integration ahead of time. It's all configured. All the cabling is connected. You basically plug it into the power source, and you're up and running with very little administrative overhead or implementation time. And because it's modular in nature, it also provides for investment protection and the ability to scale the system as needed as data grows, as your access requirements grow. The modularity nature of the system allows you to add and contract the different tiers of storage as well as the different compute resources for running your repository software and your access. So, as I mentioned, the benefits of these types of solutions, they're ready to run, they're factory tested, tuned, optimized. They provide for the business continuity and disaster recovery right into the rack itself. So it's, the automated recovery and recall of data, automated bit checking, checksums. So if there are multiple copies of an object and one of those copies becomes corrupt, the system can either alert an administrator or automatically resolve any discrepancies within the data. And it also eliminates the need to run separate backup software. And the challenge is trying to back up a repository and do it, in a window of opportunity, especially as that repository continues to grow in the number of objects that are being stored. And the Infinite Archive system is also excellent for those institutions who are building out a repository as an institutional repository and have certain legal retention requirements or grant requirements to preserve data for the long term. This solution is excellent at addressing those concerns. So without further ado, I'd like to thank you all for your time, and I'll ask the operator here to open it up for questions and answers, and we'll start with some of the questions in the chat. But operator, if you could open it up.
Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question, please press star then 1.
While we wait for the questions to be queued up, I will go ahead and read some of these questions that have been placed into the chat window. So the first question comes from Elias, and Elias asked if you could talk a little bit more about the new features of the STAT package in the 1.6 release, and if this will work with SMLUI and Mannequin. I think this question is for Michelle.
Yeah, actually, Brad, I think, has answered part of it. He's been going along. There are several STAT packages that have been developed, one by University of Rochester, one by Minho, and I think there's even more than that. And but there is an effort going on right now that's being led by Richard Rogers. Is that right? No, Mark Wood, who's one of our committers, to gather all the requirements for the statistics to make it to enable that work to happen for the 1.6 release. And so what they'll probably do, they'll first look at one of the existing add-on packages, such as the Minho Stats, which include, ability to look at how many downloads you get per item and by what faculty member. I mean, it's fairly rich and there's lots of information on the wiki. But see if there's more that the community is asking them that to put into the 1.6 release. Anything you want to add to that, Brad?
No, I think I've already gotten it in what I typed.
Okay.
So just quickly, the three areas mentioned, which are embargo, which is led by Stuart Lewis, the statistics by Mark Wood, and batch import by Richard Rogers, are areas that we're actively soliciting requirements from the community for development that will be going into 1.6 to release sometime this fall.
Yeah, and if you are a DSpace user, you can just post directly to those guys or on the general or the tech list, and we'll pick it up.
Okay, next question comes from Gary Graff. What file types can be indexed, for example, PDF, Microsoft Office, etc.?
Yeah, so any text file can be indexed. I mean, typically Word, any of the Microsoft files. PDFs, there are different issues with some of the PDF files. Brad, you might want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, well, as Michelle mentioned, the indexing will work across any text files. The degree to which you'll be able to effectively get into the full text of them is going to vary with the type of the file. There can be challenges for files that do not have text within them. For example, some PDFs that appear to have text don't actually have text within them.
Okay, great. Next question comes from Charles. Is DSpace ADA compliant?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. Do you want to answer that, Brad?
I don't know that I know the answer to that either. I suspect that the older interface, the JSP UI, doesn't fully meet those website design guidelines based on when it was developed. There's a chance that Mannequin does, but we need to go back and look.
We'll have to follow up with you on that one.
Great, thank you. Next question comes from Connie Frankenfield. Can you have more than one license so that different restrictions can be applied?
Yeah, Brad, I think you already answered this one, so why don't you just follow up on it?
Yeah, so to follow up, yes, you can have more than one license. I'm not sure when you're asking about the restrictions, whether you're thinking in terms of licensing restrictions or access restrictions, but access restrictions would not be automatically done on the basis of the license. You would have to set those up separately in terms of your collection. But you can certainly apply licenses at whichever level you want to. So you may have a default for your entire system, but it can be overridden down to the item level.
Operator, are there any folks on the line?
There are no questions.
Okay, great. Let me continue on with some of the questions in the chat window. So Connie's next question is, does the system have a notification when copyright or other access restrictions expire?
No, not an automatic notification. This is one of the features, what we're calling the embargo system, is looking for to be built out and added in 1.6. So you can remove access restrictions, but you have to do that through manual scripting.
Okay, great. Next question is from Joel Ludis. Can we batch load several files at one time?
Brad, you want to answer that one?
So the answer is that you can't do that directly through the user interfaces. There have been APIs and tools to enable that through the back end for a while. They tend to require some customization to your local needs based on what the format of the batch that you're trying to load is. And there is an effort around bulk import, again, getting requirements gathered for DSpace 1.6.
Right, and there are some tools, like for example, there's there's some specific tools based on what your metadata scheme is. So there's a METS-based import-export tool, which allows you to take something that's got METS-based metadata and associated bitstreams with it and move it into a DSpace instance and vice versa. So there are a variety of tools available, but you really got to look at what your data stream and your metadata schema is.
Okay, next question comes from Merle Branner. He sees that a map is being used for this presentation. Is DSpace cross-platform?
The answer to that is yes, it is. It's a Java application. It's known to run well under Unix-like platforms. It's mostly developed under Linux, but we have developers that work under Windows and Mac OS as well, and it does run across all of those platforms.
Next question. Does the system notify the administrator if a checksum changes?
No, you have to run, there's no automated user administrator interface for bit integrity checking. You've got to run the checksum script periodically, and you have to put that data into a table if you want to visualize it on a regular basis.
Okay, next question is from Lisa. Can the system create a record without having an attached digital asset?
Yeah, there are plenty of DSpace instances that just have the metadata record. I'm not sure, is there anything special you have to do there, Brad?
I don't believe so, no.
That's not uncommon use.
Okay, Lisa Denzel asked another question. She asked if we can download this presentation. This presentation will be available for replay and download on the DSpace site, and Sun will be sending to all registrants a link and copy of this presentation. Next question comes from Anastasia. What platforms does DSpace run on?
I think we just answered that.
Yeah.
Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Unix-like operating system.
Okay. Next question. Has DSpace been deployed with MySQL?
No, it hasn't. Primarily, it works out of the box with PostgreSQL and with Oracle.
Okay. Next one from Joshua. Does or will DSpace have the capability to insert internal metadata within different files using technologies such as EXIF or IPTC or XMP?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, Brad. Do you have any idea?
In DSpace 1, the model of the system is to store the metadata in relatively fixed formats within its own relational database structure. So while you can define new elements, you would then also need to have code to move in and out of those formats. So DSpace doesn't really associate metadata in separate attached files within the bundle. That does change in the DSpace 2 architecture, but in DSpace 1 you would have to do some extra work to make that happen.
Okay, just a couple more questions as we're running out of time. This next one comes from Joshua Marco. This question is, are you able to pass the search string from DSpace to the data file itself, such as searching for South Dakota within a 500-page PDF or deja vu file?
So as long as the text is extracted from the file, it's completely searchable and you'd be able to find the string. The problem is with a lot of these text-based search engines, the relevancy means that it might be difficult to find on a list of results because it's not ranked in a way that makes it easy for the user to find that particular string.
Following up on that, the question that just came from Michael Combs, DSpace can index the text, the clear, transparent text portion of a PDF document, so those results would be in there.
Okay. Question from Nicholas. You mentioned that addition to Giblet Core Metadata, DSpace also supports mods. Where can we find more information about how to incorporate mods?
There is a whole section of it on the wiki, but I'm just seeing if it's in the manual itself. But there's quite a bit of it on the wiki, I know. So if you type in mods in wiki.dspace.org, you should pull up a set of results. And if not, please email me directly, michelle@dspace.org, and I will give you the right links.
Great. And I'm going to take this last question from Mike Mansfield. Can you address security updates, and how do you push an update to DSpace out to fix security problems?
Brad, I'll let you answer that one.
I'll take that. So we do, on occasion, get security reports on DSpace. Generally, the way those are handled is that they are triaged by the DSpace committers group, and if they are considered to be urgent, the committers will push out either a patch or a new release, which is then announced on the mailing list. So the way to stay informed is to be subscribed to the DSpace mailing list. And then at that point, it's the responsibility of the individual repository to bring down that code patch and install it, since we can't make them do that.
Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for their time today. Thank you, Michelle, Brad, Art, and Keith for your time. Again, this call is being recorded, and the presentation and the playback will be available and sent to all registrants for this webinar series within the next couple of days. If you have additional questions, I'm sorry we ran out of time today, please send an email to either Brad or to Michelle or Art Pasquinelli or Keith or Jackie, and their emails are in the presentation, and I can send them to you separately as well. Again, thank you so much for your time today, and our next webinar will be held on the 17th of June at 9 a.m., and the registration information is on the sun.com web event registration site where you found this meeting, as well as on the DSpace community site.
And the next webinar is a comparison of features and functionality between DSpace platform and Fedora platform, if anybody is interested. And it's 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
Great. Thanks again, everybody.